My name is Rosemary De Leon. Back when I was 16, I was losing a lot of weight and just was very lethargic, didn't really have a lot of energy. And so they kept on doing testing and finding out like what was wrong with me. My mom just thought I was lazy though, and I would always get in trouble. But anyhow, I ended up going. I was in a very low income community, and there was a it was like a bus that would come to the schools to give free health. And this one doctor did a very simple, weird test, and he just kind of made me close my eyes and I guess check my balance. He kind of did this, and he got concerned and he asked me to go and get a chest X-ray at the Children's Hospital. Um, so I did, and they said it had came out clear. So then he went for further testing and he told me to go check my gallbladder because I was having gallbladder symptoms. And when I went to the gastro doctor, he said, well, there could be a 20% chance that you have cancer, but most likely your gallbladder just is not working. So I had state insurance, and he was like, it's going to take about 2 months to get authorization. So do me a favor, plan out with your mom kind of a day that works for you guys. Go to the ER. This is the symptoms you're going to say you have, that you have severe pain. Give them my name, and we'll try to do an emergency surgery. I said, okay. So we did that. I went to the ER, and they admitted me. They didn't really tell me anything. And in the morning, early morning, he came in and he said, well, I have a bad news and good news. He said, good news is we're going to get your surgery done. We're going to get it done today. We're going to remove your gallbladder. I said, okay, bad news. He said, you have cancer. And we're going to go ahead and send an oncologist to come and kind of give you a rundown of, what it is, what kind, and what are your options. I was young. I was 16. I didn't know what that meant. It didn't really hit until oncologists came in and said, okay, well, you have Hodgkin's lymphoma and you are at stage 4B. So cancer usually goes in stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, and each one has an A and a B. He said, you're at your last stage, and I give you 3 months to live. And if you do chemo, you can probably expand your life for a year. I didn't know what chemo was. I just thought it was a machine or something. And so I kind of was numb, and I didn't really cry until I saw my mom crying. And it kind of just, I started tearing up, and he just basically said to think about it, talk to your parents, and so he left, and for a long time, I stood there, and my mom was like, "Hey, call your dad." My dad used to work in factories, so I called him and said, "Hey, Dad, you need to come to the hospital." And he was like, "What's wrong?" I didn't want to tell him. He came to the hospital. We broke the news, and he left. He didn't react to anything. He just left and never came back, to the hospital. Later on, I found out that he went to disinfect the room and I guess he just couldn't handle it. So I had to make a decision. And at that time, I was already like 98 pounds. And so I told my mom I didn't want to go through chemo. I would rather just live my life. And she begged me and said, do it for your dad. You're an only child. So I decided, it took me like about a day, and I said, fine, I'll do it. So the doctor came back and he said, well, due to your condition, you're just really weak. Your immune system is shot. You don't have much weight. We don't even know if you'll survive the first chemo. But we're going to keep you here because I was just constantly throwing up. We want to have you gain at least 5 to 10 pounds. And so I tried. I couldn't eat anything. I was just constantly throwing up. I think I gained 2 pounds. So finally, after 2 weeks of being in the hospital, they said, okay, fine, we're going to do this chemo treatment. And like I said, they didn't know if I would survive it. So they did. It was hell, but I did survive it. I was there for an additional, I think, 3 days, and then they sent me home. And then the first night that I was home, I had a seizure, and I had to come back to the hospital. I was there for another week, and the treatment plan was basically to get chemo every Thursday. So I would get chemo every Thursday, but by a month in, I wasn't producing enough red blood cells. And so I needed Epigen, which was a synthetic blood. and every shot was like $1,200, and I needed 7 every month. And my mom insurance wasn't covering it, and my mom was desperate and she didn't know what to do. So I don't know exactly how my information got to City of Hope. And City of Hope called my mom and told her that they if she was willing to have me go through an experimental drug and help me be part of their survivorship program that they have, that they would cover anything the insurance didn't. And my mom was fearful, and she thought, "Oh, I don't want you to be, what does she call it, like a lab rat, kind of, you know." But she didn't have a choice because without blood red cells, I couldn't continue treatment. So I went to City of Hope, and when I got to City of Hope, they completely stopped every treatment that I was having. So I was with no treatment for a month. They did everything from neural checks to they checked my IQ, they checked basically all my intellectual, my body. I mean, they did every test in the world, dietary, everything, just to have a baseline for their experimental drug. And so I started the treatment there, and that treatment was brutal. So chemo, for those who don't know, come in a shot, if not in a little bag. So usually that's your treatment. And so I would get that every Thursday, but every 4 weeks I would get a whole liter of chemo flush into my body. So I had to stay in the hospital. So they would flush me out with 2 liters of saline, 1 liter of chemo, 2 liters of saline, and they would keep me there for the whole weekend because the chemo was so intense that it could basically shut down my whole organ. And then I went through chemo for a year, and the tumor responded. I actually had several tumors. I had a tumor the size of a football in my chest. I had one in my lung, one in my spleen, one under my heart. And they responded very well. And so about a year in, they said, okay, we're going to stop chemo. We're going to do radiation. So I did 2 months of radiation, about a month and a half of radiation. And then after that, I went on remission. So that was my first journey. Due to the chemotherapy that I took, due to the radiation that I took, that put me at high risk for a lot of things. And one of them was breast cancer. So now here we go at 2020. I was having issues with my uterus, and I went to the OBGYN, and she was my brand new OBGYN. So they ask you all these questions. I informed her that I had a lump, one here and one here. And so she took me out for testing. The mammogram was like, okay, well, wasn't conclusive. So I had to go for further testing. They ended up finding out that they were benign, but I also went to genetic testing, and I went through the process. And so my dad's side has ovarian cancer history. So due to that, I was at a high risk, plus radiation, plus chemotherapy, and my mom had capsulated breast cancer due to high estrogen. So they pretty much came to me and said, well, even though they're benign, most likely the chances of you getting breast cancer are extremely high. You're in the 60 to 80% percentage, and 30% is already considered high. They gave me options, and one of them was to continue to check myself every 6 months. And she said as I got older, it was just a higher percentage. So it was a matter of not if, but when. So that wasn't an option for me. The second one was to put me on a medication for 5 years that would extend, basically decrease the chances of breast cancer for 10. But I'm fairly young, so that wasn't going to work because then I'm back to it again. And the third one was to remove my breast. It was a hard decision to make. I decided to remove my breast, and they send me to a plastic surgeon, and they talk about how beautiful, they can make your breast look. And so I think naively, I thought, okay, I would just go remove my breast and I'm going to get breast implants. What's the big deal? Like, I didn't realize the whole process that went through it. I feel like a lot of people don't know it. Doctors don't tell you. And I don't know if it's because they're uncomfortable to have those conversations, but definitely the journey was not that simple. I remove my breasts, and I didn't realize how much you grieve them. And I'm not someone who is very big on image, and I wasn't attached to them, but not having them was a shocker. Getting to see yourself in the mirror and know that nothing is there. And because I had big breasts, they said that the chances of me to be able to keep my nipples were very minimal. And so I said I still want to try. So I did. Unfortunately, they got infected and they became necrotic, which means the blood wasn't going and they were dying. And so I had to go back into surgery and remove my nipples. And they had put expanders in there and they were removed. So when I came out of that surgery, I literally had holes caving in and a whole bunch of skin around it. And I felt like I looked like a monster, I guess. I would look at myself in the mirror and remember what I had and then see what I had become was hard. Um, and but I already had made the decision, and for a while I regretted it. And I guess that's just the shallowness in me. But I had to think about the bigger picture of what it meant for my kids and for me to be alive. So I had to stay like that for 6 weeks. And then when I went back to the plastic surgeon, they said that the tissues inside had got messed up because of the infection. And so now they had to remove the muscle in the back to put a bed for the new implant. And my skin was so thin that they needed to remove the skin as well to put a flap. So we went in and we did that surgery. Um, and so now I have huge scars in my back. And I woke up with expanders um, and extra skin that looked just really weird. And then they gave me a prosthetic bra. And so even though when I would put shirts on and I look in the mirror with a prosthetic bra, I felt more comfortable. But at the end of the day, it was still hard because you bend over and the prosthetics go and there's a big old hole, and you're conscious of the fact of what you can and cannot wear. And another thing is when you remove this, there's a buildup of fluid, which people call the Buddha belly. And so this part of your stomach is bigger. So you're already looking deformed, and through that process, intimacy was hard. Um, I didn't feel sexy. I didn't feel like a woman. And, when you put a prosthetic to be able to be with your husband at the time I was married, it wasn't the same. They can't touch you, you're careful. And it was very uncomfortable. But at the same time, as much as your significant other can sit here and tell you, like, it's okay, you're beautiful, you don't feel it. Um, and it's definitely a challenge. And a lot of things that I learned in regards to like my process was how much information wasn't out there. And I didn't realize that through all this whole entire time I had to sleep in a recliner. And luckily I had one. And I couldn't really go from one side to another. I couldn't carry things. I needed a mastectomy pillow, which I didn't even know about, and that was a lifesaver. There was things that I needed to modify. I couldn't work out. I couldn't do a lot of things. And as I went through my journey, I never really cried about it in front of anybody, and could not look at myself in the mirror. I didn't look at myself in the mirror for like 2-3 years. I want to say I started looking at myself in the mirror probably after that was done. But as the expanders, they fill in your expanders every week with a certain amount of saline, and they start growing and growing and growing, and you feel a little bit more comfortable. And I'm not gonna lie, when the process it was always completed, they would look great. They looked huge, and I had big breasts, so I was like, okay, this is what they're gonna look like, and I was excited for what was coming. And then unfortunately one popped. And so now I had one that was low and one that was high. And so I had to go back to surgery and get those out and get new ones in and start the process all over again. So finally, when that process was done, I was happy and I was content and I was like, okay, it's time for my exchange, which means is when they're gonna remove um, your temporary expanders and then you're gonna put your implants. And they put mine, they put mine's over the muscle, and I said, okay. When I woke up from that surgery, I was so disappointed and I was crying because what you think it looks like with your expanders is not what your breasts look like, because your expanders look nice and round and big, and I woke up and I felt flat chested. Nobody took the time to let me know that they needed to drop, that there was a process to that. um, I just looked flat chested. I looked like a boy, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And I got 750 cc's of saline, and 800 is the max. And I was like, "Okay, well," I was just, it was like starting all over again. Like, what am I gonna do now? Now I don't have options. I've maxed out. Um, and it didn't. It took me doing research to find out, and just no, they have to drop, they have to, fluff up. There's a process. And I feel like doctors are not good about saying shit like that. And they should, because you wake up disappointed and you think that you're going to wake up looking a certain way. And that's not it. You think when you begin this journey, like, oh, okay, I'm going to go from, these boobs to, oh, I'm going to get implants. It's not the same. An implant that is put in a skin with no breast tissue is not the same as you putting an implant on a breast tissue on a breast that's already formed and shaped. So your breasts are not shaped correctly. Your breasts don't look beautiful and nice, they have some deformation to it. And then so you wake up and you look at yourself in the mirror and you feel like, okay, this is it. And you realize it's not it. We still have more to go. It took me a while to grasp and be able to accept the fact that now I have small breasts in comparison to what I used to have. But they do look a lot better since they fluffed and whatnot. But then I also then had to go through the process of fat transfer. And that was because on this side, it was really flat. Like I said, my breasts weren't shaped. And so I then had to get an additional 2 surgeries to get fat out of my body and to put the fat into the breast to shape the breast. And once again, I was like, hey, doc, I want bigger breasts. Like, that's what I want. I mean, I knew I couldn't go way bigger. But, and they tell you what you want to hear. Oh, yeah, we're going to do everything possible. And you wake up again disappointed because your breasts will never be the same. And it's not maybe that they're not doing a good job. It's just that maybe you wake up thinking you're going to look like what you used to look like, or somehow you're going to feel back to what you are. And no matter what happens, they're not, because they're not your breasts. They're not, you lost a part of you. And I had to understand that, and I didn't grieve it because I felt like I was being selfish if I grieved my breasts. Like, how shallow do you look by grieving your breasts? How selfish are you that you're still living, yet you're grieving breasts? And I feel like that's not talked about. And we should be able to grieve them because we lost a part of ourselves, a part that was with us since we were born, and a part that makes us women and feminine and feel sexy. And so even though after my 5 surgeries were all completed, and I actually 6 of them, uh, after my fat graftings, because I did several, I then didn't have any nipples. And unfortunately, not that it matters, but like, I got through a divorce. And how do you go back to dating and have, you know, something that's just, how do you explain that? You know what I mean? And even with when I was still married, having intimacy, even when they were completely like, I always wore a bra. I ended up wearing, like, buying little, what do you call those? The patless bras, something to cover always. I never felt comfortable I never showered with my spouse. I didn't do that because I was ashamed of what I looked like. I looked different. I didn't have nipples, you know? And then I came here and I really was just only going to get the nipple. But then I was so terrified of my scars because I have so many of them that I started covering them up with tattoos. And I had a friend show me this flower and I thought it was so beautiful. And I showed it to you. And you said, yeah, why not? I think you just kind of jumped on it and didn't even really think about it. And I never really thought that they were going to come out the way they did. But it's been, what, 2, 3 weeks? And I want to say for the first time, I have been able to feel comfortable in my own skin. I, I feel sexy. I feel like a woman. And I haven't felt that since 2020. Um, and I realized through this process of getting like the tattoos that how much I did grieve them and how much I did miss them. And I feel like we should be entitled to that, um, to feel there and be so proud. And I had of one situation I showed a friend, and she looked at me in her face. It wasn't a face of like, oh my God. It was a face like, what the fuck? And I looked at her and she was like, well, what do you mean you didn't have nipples? And I thought she knew. I mean, I explained my process. I'm pretty open about it. And she was like, but how do you tell a guy that? And just her look and her judgment made me feel a certain way. And I feel like, okay, if she felt that way, like, how do you come across when you are intimate with someone or when you do explain that, you know? But it made me also realize that a lot of people are very naive and don't understand what it takes to go through this, because it's not something that you're going to go into surgery, you're going to get out and you're going to look great. Stop. And even if they do a flap surgery, which is where they do a tummy tuck and they get that to rebuild your breast, which is done right away, you're still going to grieve them because you lost a part of you, you know? And there's so much that you go through, like drainages. Those suck. They hurt and they're bleeding and they're just gross. And, you know, you got to keep them in there. And then, you know, all the tissue around them gets raw. And you get that every single surgery you get them. And I've had 3 at a time, 4 at a time. Nobody explains the process of having to take a shower with them. Where do you put them? You know, like, and what I did, honestly, I found a fanny pack in Walmart and I would put it here and I'd put my drains in my fanny pack and that's how I showered, you know? And there's all these things that you look for and then you feel like, oh, well, I need to have the expensive stuff because they sell drainage packages. But I'm like, it cost me $5, girl. I still wear the fanny pack. You know, you put it in there and you do what you do, but it's things that nobody tells you this. You learn as you go. And I feel like more people should talk about their story and share these things. Um, I had to buy a pillow. You know, when you put a seatbelt, till this day, it's uncomfortable. You know, and it. There's certain sensations as well. You know, sometimes it itches and you scratch and you don't feel nothing. You know, like there's so many little things that happen through the process that nobody really talks about. You know, I I think the hardest part was the drainages. Those suck. You know, how to drain them, how to remove them, what to expect, you know, and it's it's quite a journey, but I'm so glad that it's over, at least for me. Um, and I couldn't thank you and your husband more. I don't have words to describe how grateful I am for everything. I am truly, and whatever, you know, all this work that you do. And you might think it's just a tattoo, but you are changing someone's life, you know, for the good. You're not really saving a marriage or even saving yourself from thoughts, you know, because like I said, I wasn't attached like that, but I do know women who are, who feel the world is coming to an end because they don't have breasts, you know. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I thank you. Cuddy.